Coming up on Bridge City News, the Liberals threaten to call an election over the Conservatives' demand to form a new committee to investigate the We Charity scandal. We have the latest. Our country's chief public health officer has a warning about misinformation circulating about the COVID-19 virus. And the Blood Tribe has come out with a creative way of educating their youth on the dangers of the novel coronavirus.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. It appears as though we will not be going to the polls for now. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberals survived a confidence vote earlier today to avoid plunging the country into a snap pandemic election. The PM threatened to call the election over the Conservatives' demand that a new committee continue to investigate the We Charity scandal. It turns out the Liberals received enough support from opposition MPs to vote against the Conservative motion to probe alleged Liberal corruption. Tory leader Aaron O'Toole says the Liberals cannot threaten an election every time they get a tough question.
If the Prime Minister is going to threaten an election in a pandemic, every time an opposition party asks a question on their pandemic planning, on support for small business, on former Liberal MPs and Liberal insiders getting access to hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, he's going to have to get used to the fact that the Conservatives are going to do our job. We're here for a better response in the second wave of the pandemic. We're here to partner with the provinces to be better prepared than we were federally with the border and other things in the pandemic. We're here to ask questions in accordance with our role as an opposition party.
Lethbridge Tory MP Rachel Harder says it was important for all Canadians to know what happened with the We Charity scandal and that special committee looking into the matter was desperately needed.
What is so damning about doing a study that the Prime Minister would go all the way to threatening an election where he would bring Canadians out in the middle of a pandemic to go to the polls? He is willing to put your health, your safety, your family at risk so that he can cover himself. That's incredibly selfish. That's not a leader.
A number of Alberta mayors are still upset over the province's decision to consolidate EMS dispatch services. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman met with Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi, Red Deer Mayor Tara Veer, and Wood Buffalo's Don Scott in Red Deer to voice their concerns. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says the change will save the province around $6 million annually and will come into effect on January 4th. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says none of the mayors were consulted and the decision to consolidate was short-sighted and reckless. Spearman says the consolidation will also add an extra cost to Lethbridge.
In addition to the negative patient outcomes, in Lethbridge alone, we are estimating that this decision will increase our costs by over $5 million in annual expenses as a direct consequence of the dispatch transition. This includes 30 new positions needed in our fire response to maintain the existing level of service that we're able to provide with our current, efficient, fully integrated system.
Spearman adds that he wants Premier Jason Kenney to review the decision by Shandro to consolidate the ambulance dispatch services. Advanced polling starts today in the Crow's Nest Pass for a new city councillor. Former council member Gordon Lundy resigned in March due to personal reasons, and now 2 local realtors are vying to be his replacement. Both say that the economy and job creation are what residents care about most when casting their ballots.
I believe that people are given the opportunity to have employment and good employment. So there has to be a meet in the middle kind of world there. Tourism is wonderful, but then this summer in particular with COVID, it showed we had an awful lot of people coming here because of the travel restrictions and stuff just for days out and that. And it showed us that they know where we are, but it also showed us our shortcomings there.
There's going to be some huge challenges coming up, with infrastructure, the growth of the community, supply and demand for housing, supply and demand for industrial property, and not only that, but the challenges of our tourism. Like we've got a great tourism, equal tourism here. So that has to be balanced because we have a lot of people now coming, recognizing the Crow's Nest Pass for its tourism.
The by-election will take place on Monday. Lethbridge police have charged a man for attempting to rob a cab driver. On Tuesday, the driver dropped off 3 passengers at a home on 20th Avenue South in Lethbridge, and the fare was paid by a bank card. Now, upon leaving the cab, one of the passengers put a knife to the driver's throat, demanding he hand over all of his money. The driver replied that he had none, and the subject walked away. Fortunately, he was later picked up by police. 35-year-old Joe Zwart faces a robbery charge and will appear in court on November 19th. Loneliness can be debilitating, and according to Stats Canada, about 26% of Canadians over the age of 65 live alone. Studies have shown that many seniors are also quite vulnerable to COVID-19. Volunteer Lethbridge wants you to help our seniors through the Keep in Touch program. They say it's pretty easy to do, but will help the elderly in a big way.
We've been kind of surprised. The suffering and the loneliness is really a serious issue for a lot of them, and they themselves talk about their emotional decline, how we often hear the word how depressed I am, how difficult this is, and also physical decline. So I've had many too that have commented on the fact that they're not out and about, they're not going. A lot of them maybe used to walk at the mall, or they used to go to the senior center and participate in fitness, and so for many of them they're seeing physical decline as well in their mobility. We're actually starting now to get way more seniors. I've had 3 today, which is pretty not consistent with the last 6 months. So it's because of the weather, right? I think they're really feeling the isolation more now that they can't even go in the backyard there.
If you're interested in volunteering, you can email helpinghands@volunteerlethbridge.com. A Lethbridge group has created an initiative to help people lose their COVID-19 weight. The Lethbridge Fit Body Camp has put out the challenge to help many in our region transform their lives. Video journalist Loris Alexander caught up with the group and has more.
Our transformation challenge started on September 21st.
An 8-week challenge that gives guidance and motivation to help people get more active in their daily lives. And there's more.
There's kind of like 2 prizes that go for our challenge. FitBody HQ actually puts up of $10,000 US for the overall winner of the brand, but then we have local prizes also.
COYOTE says his fitness studio structures nutrition with sustainability in mind.
We don't want people to come lose weight and then have that weight come back. So our program is all structured on creating a sustainable model that not only delivers results for the challenge, but then those clients have the habits and the capability to maintain that for the rest of their life. We do transformation challenges for 2 reasons. One, it's an opportunity for people who aren't currently members at FitBody Bootcamp to come in and do a program, see what it's all about, and see if that's the journey that they want to be on to reach their goals. But it's also an opportunity for our clients to get a higher end service so that they can reach their goals that they're looking for, because in our challenges, we're not just focused on workouts, it's actually mostly focused all on nutrition.
The next Transformation Challenge will start on February 1st, 2021. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Nuppets, or native Muppets. They're puppets that are taken from the idea of Sesame Street and turned into Indigenous puppets. As Micah Quinn explains now, these puppets are being used in a special way to teach Indigenous kids from the Blood Tribe how to stay safe during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Puppeteer Derek Starlight says the day the creator of Sesame Street, Jim Henson, passed away was actually the day he dedicated his life to puppetry. This resulted in Starlight making his own version of the puppets, called Nuppets.
And, most people, the audience I perform for are the Aboriginal people, Indigenous across the country. And, nobody's really seen a native Muppet before, and a native performer playing one, so I was, the first native puppeteer comedian in the country.
Starlight partnered up with the Blood Tribe to release a video outlining COVID-19 safety on how to wear a mask for young kids.
And I knew he would have that kind of expertise in speaking to his audience, especially for kids using his Nuppets. So that's where he kind of got involved, and it was relatively easy to kind of pitch the idea to him, and he was on board right away. So he's been not just the puppeteer in all of this, he's been really instrumental in kind of doing a lot of the script writing as well.
A few of the Nuppets are actually based on people from Starlight's life.
Well, the Granny Nuppet here is actually my grandmother. She had passed away, but with her blessing, she let me use the character. And Granny always had a positive message, and she was very strict, so we all listened to Granny. And little Bo here is actually me when I was a child, wanting to go to Sesame Street.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Alberta's top doctor says the province is now in the danger zone due to increasing COVID-19 cases. Dr. Dina Henshaw says the province reported 323 new coronavirus cases over the past 24 hours and one additional death. The province has said its health system can manage as long as more than half of its intensive care beds are filled with COVID-19 patients and its daily hospitalization rate stays below 5%. Henshaw says the coming weeks will tell whether Albertans can bend the curve downwards. Alberta Health says aggressive contact tracing is underway following a major COVID-19 outbreak linked to a Calgary wedding. The health agency says 49 cases have been linked to the event earlier this month. Health officials say guests included a large number of people from different households. AHS spokesperson Tom McMillan says Calgary has seen several recent outbreaks linked to social gatherings. Saskatchewan is reporting 44 new COVID-19 cases, bringing its total to 427 active. Health officials say the new cases are linked to outbreaks at nightclubs, a church event in Prince Albert, and parties and weddings. There are 18 people in Saskatchewan hospitals due to the virus. 2 people as well are in intensive care. Saskatchewan's 2 main party leaders are encouraging voters to avoid long lineups and to cast their ballots early at advanced polls. 5 days of advanced polling began today with 50 additional locations along with extended hours. Saskatchewan Party leader Scott Moe is encouraging people to opt for advance voting as a safety precaution during the pandemic. NDP leader Ryan Miley says he planned on casting his ballot in Saskatoon today and is urging supporters to also vote in advance. Ontario is reporting another 790 new cases of COVID-19 today, and 144 are related to schools. 9 more people have died from the virus, and 71 of the 216 hospital are in intensive care. In Quebec, meanwhile, they're reporting 1,072 new cases, along with 19 more deaths. And in Manitoba, the cabinet there has raised the fine to $5,000 for those caught ignoring public health orders, which is nearly double the original penalty. Canada's Public Chief Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says combating fake news about the COVID-19 pandemic is a serious challenge for public health. She says the amount of misinformation about the virus hitting Canadians is troubling.
So misinformation and disinformation does not help public health officials. Everybody, I think, can do more. Individuals not only should try and ask themselves, as I've said multiple times, of when you look at a piece of information, ask a number of questions, including exactly where does this come from? Is that domain name credible? Can we use those fact checker websites to check before? Definitely ask yourself this question before you forward the information to someone else. So be media smart as well as science smart, if you like. You're sort of everyone is an armchair epidemiologist. Everyone should actually be media smart at this point in time.
The chief of the Nova Scotia First Nation behind a disputed lobster fishery says his band has been blacklisted by lobster buyers. Saba Nagadi First Nation chief Mike Sack says recent vandalism and the loss of potential sales has cost the band more than $1.5 million. Sack will appear remotely before the House of Commons Committee on Fisheries and Oceans to discuss his community's moderate livelihood fishery. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki says her force is fully engaged in the lobster dispute that has seen eruptions of violence. Lucki says RCMP units have been working tirelessly to maintain peace in southwestern Nova Scotia.
Unfortunately, there have been those that have been engaged in criminal behavior. As is widely known, there have been several instances of violent and destructive criminal acts in recent weeks. I strongly condemn these acts. The Nova Scotia RCMP has launched investigations into a number of incidents with 2 people already charged, including the assault against Chief Sack. Suspects have been identified in the other incidents, and investigations are ongoing. This conflict has been going on for many, many years, and we have a very specific mandate, and our mandate is to keep the peace, keep people safe, and enforce the law.
Many experts say the reason why we're seeing various protests and riots in places like Washington State and Oregon is because of the woke movement. People have had enough of social injustices, including racism. Dr. Calvin Beisner of the Cornwall Alliance says if social justice warriors want to get their messages across, they need to go about it in a different way.
Truly compassionate policy requires dispassionate analysis. I think that's brilliant. And it's what I would love to see grow more and more in the woke movement, a wedding together of compassionate motivation with dispassionate analysis of actual consequences of policy.
Catch the full interview with Dr. Beisner and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Pope Francis has stunned the world. For the first time as Pope, while being interviewed during a documentary filming, he said there needs to be a civil union law so that those in the LGBTQ2+ community are legally covered. According to recent reports, Pope Francis then went on to say that homosexual people have the right to be in a family and they are children of God. Francis, believed to be the first pope to use the word gay publicly, allegedly told a reporter in 2013 that if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Holocaust survivors Ruth Brandspiegel and Israel Sasha Eisenberg parted ways in 1949 after befriending one another in a post-World War II displaced persons camp in Austria. They were reunited via Zoom 71 years later during Yom Kippur.
I even didn't know that Regina was in America. And it's 70 years and I was a child. So I called it a miracle because I don't see any other way that humans can organize such an event. It didn't change at all, that's how I remember it.
This was full of happy tears and just wonders and miracles that all this just came together. And we sat there for hours and hours talking, exchanging pictures.
It's a shame that we were not able to hug under these circumstances, but it was something for me that I never expected. And this was something that gave me so much pleasure that I'm just crying now too.
That is one beautiful reunion. All of the snow we've received is beautiful if you're a skier or a snowboarder. We have received up to 10 centimeters of the white stuff and more of it is on the way. Full weather details are coming up. If you live in southwestern Alberta and you don't have your winter tires on yet, it made for a very slippery drive today. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, a snowfall warning was issued from Environment Canada earlier with up to 10 centimeters of the white stuff and more snow is on the way?
Yeah, we had that overnight snowfall near the BC border and it pushed its way east right across the province of Alberta towards the Cypress Hills. That's what happened today and this evening. More snow to come, about 2 centimeters more. Minus 10, the overnight low temperature, but it's going to feel chillier than that with the wind chill, more like minus 14. Tomorrow's high, minus 7, again with the wind chill chillier. 30% chance of flurries tomorrow on Thursday. And look at that overnight temperature, minus 18. Can you believe that? What is this, January? That's what it feels like. Looking ahead to the 5-day, more snow on the way for Friday, minus 8 the high, minus 10 the high for Saturday, more snow expected for Saturday. And then finally, Sunday, the sun comes out, minus 5 the high. And then we're going to get into those plus temperatures finally early next week on Monday, 5 degrees and 6 degrees for Tuesday with a mix of sun and cloud. Now, if we look at those ALMANAC, the averages for this time of year, we're supposed to be seeing more around this 13, hovering around that. We're nowhere near that. We're even lower than these lows, unfortunately, of minus 1. 27 was the high temperature back in 2003 on this day. Minus 14 was the chilliest in 1961. Sun rose this morning at 8:03 a.m. and our sunset this evening, 6:29 p.m., giving us just a little over 10.5 hours of daylight. Now let's take a look at what's happening on the west coast tomorrow. Showers possibly in Vancouver. 10 is the high, 10 the high also from Victoria. Snow expected still in the Calgary area tomorrow here. Minus 5 the high, minus 6 expected up in Edmonton with a mix of sun and cloud. As we take a look at the rest of the prairies, mix of sun and cloud expected in Saskatoon, minus 5 the high. Same thing for Regina. They could see those flurries as well. Chance of flurries also expected in Winnipeg tomorrow. 0 is their high there. And as we take a look into central Canada, Toronto could see some showers here. 12 degrees the high, 13 the high in Ottawa, and 15 for Montreal. Looking at some good temperatures there in central Canada with a mix of sun and cloud. As we look further east into the Maritimes, this is where we are going to see more shower activities. We got the snow in the prairies, the showers out east. Fredericton's high, 17. Chance of showers expected in Charlottetown, 16 the high, 19 the high in Halifax, and a lovely 18 degrees expected to be in St. John's, Newfoundland. They could see a 60% chance of drizzle though. So there you go, that is your weather.
Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, the painkiller that experts say touched off the opioid epidemic, will plead guilty to 3 federal criminal charges as part of a settlement of more than $8 billion.
The Department of Justice is announcing a global resolution of our criminal and civil investigations into the opioid manufacturer Purdue Pharma, as well as a civil resolution with members of the Sackler family who comprise shareholders of the company. The global settlement announced today involves the company pleading guilty to 3 felony counts for defrauding the United States and violating the anti-kickback statute from 2009 to 2017.
The Alberta swimwear retailer Swimco has declared bankruptcy. According to a notice on the company's website, a proposal to restructure its business fell through. Last June, Swimco, which has been in business for 45 years, entered creditor protection due to the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, according to court documents, Swimco owes $8.7 million in unsecured liabilities. The company, meanwhile, had just $4.8 million in assets. In June, the company also owed $1.6 million to commercial landlords. Dollarama is removing a counterfeit and recalled hand sanitizer from its shelves. Experts say this is a reminder of how important it is for retailers and consumers to do their due diligence when shopping. Health Canada says it uncovered a counterfeit Daily Shield hand sanitizer for sale at a Dollarama in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Montreal-based Dollarama said the 250 milliliter products were available in half of the chain stores, and each location sold around 17 bottles. Retail sales advanced for the 4th straight month in August, but fell far short of expectations. Stats Canada says sales were up 0.4% to $53.2 billion. That was led by a 4.5% gain at building material and garden equipment suppliers. Economists on average had predicted an increase of 1.1%. Stats Can is predicting a flat retail sales period in its outlook for this fall. Tim Hortons says its move to stop double cupping hot drinks will save around 200 million cups a year from being tossed into the garbage. The subsidiary of Restaurant Brands International says customers who ask for double cups will instead receive a cup sleeve. Tim Hortons will roll out a pilot project with a compostable liner and another made with 35% recycled materials. It says it also plans to introduce new paper napkins that use 25% less material and to roll out new recyclable paper-based wrappers for sandwiches and bagels. And I'm getting hungry. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 43 points on the day to finish at 16,230. The Dow was down 97 points to 28,210. The S&P 500 was down 7 points to 3435, and the Nasdaq was down 31 points to 11,484. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.70 to $40 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 12 cents to $3.03 US. Gold was up 11 cents to $19.2444 US an ounce, and silver was unchanged at $25.05 US an ounce. Wheat is at $268 per metric ton. Barley's also at $268. Canola is at $5.49, and corn is at $275 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 88 cents to $104.58. Feeder cattle were up 38 cents to $131.15, and lean hogs were down a nickel to $69.20. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the last 24 hours to 76.09 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the federal Liberal minority government survived a confidence vote today, so we will not be seeing a snap election. Many MPs with the NDP and Green Party voted against a Conservative motion to create a new committee to investigate the We Charity scandal. Since the Liberals declared the vote to create this committee a matter of confidence, a successful vote would have triggered that election. The woke culture needs to change its approach if it wants to have a bigger impact. That's according to Dr. Calvin Beisner, national spokesperson with the Cornwall Alliance. Dr. Beisner will have more details in a Q&A with Jeanette Roche in just a moment. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here is your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization is looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to a lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. Do you or someone you love struggle with a gambling problem? Is it causing chaos to your life and relationships? Gamblers Anonymous holds weekly meetings on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and Thursdays at 6 at 408 13th Street North. For more information, call 403-331-0822 or visit albertaga.net. Go back in time and see what it was like to live as a pioneer. Coyote Flats Pioneer Village is a Western heritage museum located 1.5 kilometers south of Pitcher Butte. Walk through the village and see a railway station, post office, fire hall, school, and so much more. The museum is open daily from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. with admission of $10 for adults or $20 per family. Mobility scooters are available to guests by donation. For more information, visit coyoteflats.org. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Many today seem to be embracing what's called the woke movement with its race and gender theories and its focus on victims, and it's playing a major role in the upcoming U.S. election. Social justice is a big focus as well, but how well does the woke movement line up with biblical principles? Today's guest is Dr. Cal Beisner, the national spokesperson for the Cornwall Alliance and author of the booklet entitled Social Justice versus Biblical Justice, How Good Intentions Undermine Justice and Gospel. All right, so he joins me now via Skype from Memphis, Tennessee. Cal, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. It's great to be back with you on the show.
So Cal, let's start with this. I'm sure some people have heard of the woke movement, but possibly many have not. What exactly is the woke movement? What does that mean?
That's that's a really great question because I think the woke movement is extremely broad and it's not really precisely defined. What we might say is that it's sort of the younger generation's continuation of the progressive movement, which has roots clear back into the late 19th century. And what I see in the woke movement is, first of all, a wonderful, compassion, a real desire to look at people who are suffering in various different ways, whether it's poverty or disease or prejudice or anything else. And so many young people in the woke movement look at these suffering people and they just respond immediately with a heartfelt desire to be able to help these people. And man, if that's the root of it, you know, it's something to applaud. And so that's, I don't just start off with a knee-jerk reaction to it. I very much appreciate that. At the same time, one of my favorite economists, a man named Walter Williams, wrote in his book, The State Against Blacks, in which he examined the actual consequences, not just the intentions, but the actual consequences of lots of American federal government policy intended to help African Americans through the 1960s, 70s, into the 1980s. He wrote the book in the early 80s. What he found was that without exception, every one of those policies, regardless of the good intents, actually harmed African Americans more than it helped them. And so at one point in the book, he said, truly compassionate policy requires dispassionate analysis. I think that's brilliant. And it's what I would love to see grow more and more in the woke movement. a wedding together of compassionate motivation with dispassionate analysis of actual consequences of policy. One of the things that I'm concerned about in the woke movement is that many times folks will think, well, these people are suffering, and I want to see that suffering relieved, and doing that is a matter of justice. Well, sometimes it is a matter of justice, but sometimes instead it's a matter of something quite different. It's a matter of something that we call charity or grace. Our very word charity comes from the Greek word charis, the word for grace in the New Testament. And if we confuse justice and grace, we can wind up with policies that actually harm where we mean to do well. And we can also then really confuse the Christian faith, and what is central to it is the good news of our being saved by grace, not by our own merit through our good works.
Mm-hmm. So how could it harm them if they're trying to do good for them?
Well, let's take a concrete example out of fairly typical policy. Some folks will look at low wages that very young, early stage workers receive, perhaps in fast food restaurants and things like that, and they'll say, "Look, this is a very low wage. How can this person thrive on that kind of a wage? This ought to be raised." And so now there are different ways that we could go about raising that wage. One way would be to provide more training for that person so that she's able to earn more. She's able to produce more, and therefore an employer can afford to pay her more and still keep the business running, right? Another way to do that is simply for the employee himself to just simply, go to school, learn more skills, spend more time around the job, learning from people who've been there for a long time. Another way to do that is to ask the government to determine a minimum amount that people in this sort of job must be paid per hour, and we'll call that a minimum wage. And when we go to that, the government doing it, one of the things that we have to remember is that government is, by definition, an entity of force. Every policy that government sets forth, it is prepared to enforce by the threat of fine, the threat of imprisonment, and if you resist that, even the threat of death ultimately. And so we really should be very, very sure that this is something we think is essential to real justice if we want the government to do this.
Okay. Now, I think a big aspect of the woke movement is social justice, right? So what role does social justice play in the woke movement exactly?
Yeah. Well, it helps to try to get a good handle on just what is meant by social justice. And even that, unfortunately, is kind of difficult. One doesn't find a lot of precise definitions of it. One of the definitions I saw actually at a Canadian government website a number of years ago, and I'm trying to pull this from memory. I actually do quote it in the booklet on social justice versus biblical justice, was basically that social justice seeks to ensure some degree of equality of economic condition, of housing, of healthcare, of education, and so on, among all the people in a society.
Right.
So equality of outcome maybe is what we could term that. Some people will respond to that. Well, but since people have different likes and dislikes, they have different skills, they have different aptitudes, they have different backgrounds. A child who grows up in a home with parents who couldn't care less about reading and education just simply is very unlikely to have the same outcome as a child who grows up in a home with parents who really highly value education and reading. So equal outcomes really can't be achieved very well, but what we can do is go for equal opportunities. But even there, I just now illustrated how opportunities can be very unequal.
Right.
If you were born in the last couple of decades, you have all kinds of opportunities for high-tech healthcare that I didn't have, having been born 65 years ago. And so equality even of opportunity is something that we cannot necessarily achieve. And the attempt to achieve these equalities requires force. And it typically requires forcing some people to forgo or to forfeit what they could otherwise enjoy through their own efforts in order to provide something to other people who have not made those same efforts. So what we need to do is to come up with a solidly consistent definition of justice. And as a Christian theologian, I look to the Bible for my standard of what I would do with that. And my studies there, looking at all the uses of the different Hebrew and Greek terms that are translated just, justice, right, righteous, and so on, what I found in looking at how they're actually used in the Bible, I summarized the definition of justice this way. Justice means rendering impartially and proportionally to everyone his due in conformity with the righteous standard that is God's moral law. So the criteria there are four. Impartiality. We don't play favorites. There aren't some people to whom the laws don't apply, but they apply to the rest of us. And proportionality. You don't use the same reward for tremendously fine performance, producing an extremely valuable good, that you do for sloppy, lazy performance, producing a good that hardly anybody wants. Also, you don't punish, say, shoplifting the same way you punish murder, right? So there's proportionality of what is due to what people actually perform, what their conduct is. So we look at merit. We look at what someone has earned, either positively or negatively. And the criteria for that we find in the moral law of God as summarized, for example, in the Ten Commandments. So if we understand justice that way, then we realize that since people do differ and differ gloriously, God help us if we didn't, but because people differ and differ gloriously in what we enjoy, what we're skilled at, what we're gifted at, and so on, the attempt to equalize everyone, or even to make them more equal than they otherwise would naturally be, is actually the opposite of justice, because it requires partiality, requires playing favorites, promoting some people, some groups over other groups, and it ignores proportionality, and it ignores what is due, what is actually deserved.
Okay, so you're kind of explaining how social justice compares with biblical justice as you understand it, right? Okay, now in your writings, you have also distinguished between positive rights, which you associate with social justice, right? And then negative rights, which you say are more consistent with biblical justice. So what's the difference between those?
Yeah, it's a very important difference. And unfortunately, of course, the term negative has a negative, a nasty connotation, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so that's kind of sad. But I distinguish the two this way, and this is a fairly conventional distinction among philosophers of ethics. Negative rights are rights against harm, so that my negative right to be alive, right, is not a right to have everybody else provide for me the air and the water and the food and the clothing and the shelter that I need, right? It is a right against having other people take my life away from me unjustly. And I can actually forfeit that right. If I'm in the midst of attacking somebody else threatening to kill him, he has a right to use necessary force to prevent that, even to the point of killing me. So I've forfeited that negative right. But fundamentally, a negative right is a right against harm. My right to property is not a right for somebody to provide for me all the books that you see in my background. It is a right for me to expect that nobody who comes into my home is going to just grab some of those books and walk off and steal them. My right to health is not a right for other people to ensure that I get adequate nutrition and proper exercise and so on. It's a right not to have other people assault and batter me, poison me, and so on. So negative rights are rights against harm. Positive rights, supposedly, are rights to particular benefits. And the problem with positive rights is twofold. The first one is, if it's a right to something that other people are supposed to provide, how do we identify which other people? Can we say, that James down the street owes me a wardrobe? No, we really can't do that. And so the notion of who owes is unanswered in positive rights. But the other problem with positive rights is that in order to enforce them, we're going to wind up contradicting negative rights, violating negative rights. If I have a right to property, and if God has ordained the state, the civil government, to enforce justice, then if the state's going to provide property for me, well, it could provide it from my own earnings, in which case it's not made any difference, right? Or it can provide it from the earnings of others. But if it provides it from the earnings of others, then it is violating their negative right against harm, the taking of their property unjustly. Nothing gives me a right to somebody else's property. Right. And so positive rights are inherently self-contradictory, and for that matter, also would change drastically over time. For 10,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 200 years ago, I had a right not to have somebody punch me in the nose. You had a right, Jeanette, for nobody to steal your property, right? But 1,000 years ago, 150 years ago, who had a right to antibiotics? Nobody. We didn't have antibiotics. So do rights change over time? Is justice a malleable thing that changes over time? I don't think so. It's supposed to be a transcendent principle applicable to all people in all circumstances.
Such a huge, huge topic. Speaking of positive rights versus negative rights. But Dr. Cal Beisner, it looks like we're out of time, unfortunately. I know there's a lot to say, but we'll have to have you back on again. Dr. Cal Beisner.
Thanks very much.
Yes, national spokesperson for the Cornwall Alliance and author of Social Justice versus Biblical Justice. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jeanette. God bless.
Artificial intelligence is a big part of our society. You see the new technology in our phones, hospitals, our vehicles, in so many industries. To talk more about it is Dr. Jeff Zweerink. He's an astrophysicist and a senior research scholar with Reasons to Believe. It's an organization which combines science together with faith, and he joins me via Skype from Los Angeles. Jeff, welcome back to BCN.
It's good to be here. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Now, give me a brief description about the ladder of causation. Now, this helps identify the key steps for an artificial narrow intelligence to move into an artificial general intelligence. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so when I'm thinking artificial intelligence, growing up when I did, this is the HALs, the R2D2s, the things that are sentient, aware of who you are, aware of who they are, and kind of interact in the world. And we've got a lot of AI out there right now, which is this kind of narrow intelligence, which can play a game of chess or figure out what you're saying and ask you or order pizza online for you. And so, but the difference between those are very dramatic, because what all of the AI that we have now basically maps this set of inputs to this set of outputs. And so it's a very basically correlative way of looking at things. It's like, I see this, therefore that means this. And so there's this kind of seeing aspect to it. But if you want to get to what humans do, or that artificial general intelligence, you got to move up to the next higher rung, which is not just seeing the correlations, but actually intervening to make something happen. So, say I want to build a pool in my backyard. I can have it look and say, all right, these are the kinds of pools you could put in there. That would be a correlation type thing. But an intervention would be, say, what happens if I remove a wall from the house? Or what if I take the tree out? And then to move to the next letter of causation, the third rung, it's asking, what if I move from Los Angeles to Canada? How would that impact my building a pool? Because the things that happen in Los Angeles are very different from Canada when it comes to building a pool. So that's kind of imagining what could be beyond what is already known.
Jeff, I used to have a pool in Southern Ontario, man. The amount of work I had to put in that thing, cleaning it every day. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's all I'm saying. Now, AI such as Siri, Alexa, and even Tesla cars are almost eerie in how they respond and interact with us. What rung do these fall on, and how much does AI actually anticipate versus respond to our requests?
Well, all of the AI that's out there that I'm aware of is kind of on that first rung of causation, that they're looking at, again, mapping inputs to outputs. So they're seeing this, and therefore that means this. And there's some algorithm for how they choose between different options, but it's seeing this and correlating with that. So all of the AI that we have is at that level. But what you notice is that it's remarkable how it looks like they're doing something more. It looks like they're anticipating, but in reality, what they're doing is saying, okay, given this input, very complicated algorithm and process of mapping it to an output, but nonetheless, it's just this correlation. Input goes to that output.
I want to talk to you a bit about some concerns I know people have with when it comes to autonomous vehicles. What happens if somebody was to hack into the computer of the system and actually kidnap somebody, change their whole course, or maybe cause the brakes to fail? I mean, there's so many things can happen if technology fails or if somebody hacks into the system.
No, that's actually a very good point. I mean, when it comes to AI, it is one of these really powerful tools. It can do great goods. It can spot diseases and bad or spots on x-rays far better than people can. It's got that sort of capacity. But the more powerful the tool, the greater good you can do with it, but also the greater damage you can do with it. And so that really calls us as humans to make sure that as we're developing this, we don't just look at the technological side. We also have to look at the ethical and moral side. How do we deal with this powerful tool so that the damage is not caused, but we're actually using it for good?
Now, what are some of the myths or misconceptions associated with artificial intelligence?
I think one of the things that plays out often in that is that we see artificial intelligence, and you mentioned Alexa and Siri, and how it's like they're anticipating and they're learning, and we hear those words and we think very humanly about those. That when I'm talking with you, I hear you saying something, and I think, oh, maybe he's going there. I'm actually thinking, okay, where do I fit into this conversation? What's he trying to do? I'm thinking about it a particular way. Whereas Alexa, Siri, all of the AIs that are out there right now, again, they're just saying, all right, these inputs mean these outputs. They're not trying to consider, what are you doing? Where are you going with this? How can I help? It's really just trying to do what it's programmed to do in that sense. And in that sense, while it is learning, it's not like it's saying, we've been talking this way. Maybe it would be better if we talk this way. That would help us get there better. All it's doing is saying, well, I tried this and this was said, no, it didn't work well. So this worked better. So I'm going to go that way. So it learns in that sense, but it doesn't have that higher level cognition or thinking and saying, hey, what's going on? How do I help accomplish this goal better? Because all it is designed is to do is what it's the goal that it's been programmed to deal with.
Now, we've heard that artificial intelligence can learn, but can it think outside of what it's been programmed in to do? Like, can it look ahead and imagine, or maybe backwards to reflect on what might have been? Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a subtle question, because often, I'll give a little bit more concrete example. I can talk about learning where a ball goes. And so I could say, I know that if it's going with this speed at this angle, I know it's going to land there. And then I could say, I don't know what happens if it's a different speed and a different angle. But as I grow, I recognize, wait a second, there's a formula I can just plug this into. And so now that I know the formula, I can deal with a whole wide range of situations. But even though I'm being able to quote unquote learn what's going on in this situation, it's still the same thing. So that's what the AI is doing. It's taking what is in this general programming and saying, okay, I can work in that realm, which is very different again than what humans do. Because again, so when I go and play chess, I'm looking to win, but I could go halfway through the game. I could say, you know what? This game has been fun trying to win, but now I'm going to see how long can I play the game. There's nothing that an AI will do at this point where I'll go in there and say, you know what, this goal isn't very good. I'm just going to go a different way. Nothing about AI does that at this point.
If you want to play a long game, maybe try Monopoly or even Risk. That's also pretty long too. Now, with the third rung requiring the ability to imagine something that does not already exist, is there still a possibility that artificial intelligence technology can really advance to that point?
Well, there are people who are developing the mathematics that allows an algorithm or an artificial intelligence to do some of those, not just see, but actually intervene and gather new data to see what might go on, and also to even imagine new scenarios. But the best I understand it at this point is there are aspects that it's going to mimic of human behavior, but it still is not doing it in the way a human does. Because again, what allows the computer to do that, or the AI to do that, is there's just this incredible wealth of data that it can process through and figure out. So it may be able to imagine or get to the place where it says, okay, let's look at an entirely new situation that doesn't exist. Say maybe if I didn't move to California, where would I be today type thing. But it's not going to be able to do that nearly as universally or as generally as humans do, because there's also a relational aspect of the way humans behave. And putting that into a computer, I think that's one of the things that really distinguishes us from a computer. You think of what Spock does, the ultimate logical machine. But ultimately, what we like about Spock is that he behaves rather humanly. He actually engages in a relationship.
Now, even with the vast advances in AI, how does its limitations reveal the uniqueness of humanity?
Well, I think as we begin to think about what is an AGI and how do we get to a general intelligence, what that forces us to do is ask, what is it about humanity that's unique and distinct, and what do we need to do to make a computer do that? It used to be that if we could make, or the thought was, if we could make a computer that could beat humans at chess, that would be a general intelligence, or maybe at poker, or maybe at this. And what we found is that every time we've achieved those goals, we say, all right, we can actually build computers that are far better than humans at chess or any well-defined game, quite honestly, but they still just approach it very differently. We approach it from a thought process, but we also ask, how do we play into this? So when the computer wins the game of chess, it never says, yeah, that was a great game of chess. It doesn't say anything. It just won the game of chess. Whereas I would be very excited if I could beat a grandmaster playing chess, or my team won the Super Bowl. The AI just doesn't think that way. So there is this distinction in how humans are. We're aware of where we stand in the situation, not just accomplishing tasks like an AI would do.
Yeah, you're right. It'll just say game over. Thanks for playing. Now, what might that uniqueness say about us, where or who we come from, and our purpose in this universe?
Well, I think the fact that an AI doesn't think that way, that we do think that way, leads to the idea that perhaps this is not all there is. If we can imagine worlds outside of our universe, maybe there is a world outside our universe. If our ability to perform tasks is important, but we also are driven to relate to people, maybe we're designed to be relational. And I find that fits very comfortably within Christian theistic thought, that God in and of his being is relational. He's created us in his image. Therefore, we are relational. We're emotional beings. We're social beings. We're also engineer type beings. And so we've got this great wealth of who we are, or the attributes that we share that ultimately flow from being made in God's image. The point is to something that's far bigger than what we are. And I think as we get closer to creating an AI, we see that AI will not match us, that it's made in our image. We see that we're also made in somebody else's image.
Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and Bill Gates have expressed concerns in the past about the risk posed by artificial intelligence, perhaps that we may rely on it a little bit too much. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a definite possibility. We seem to, as a people, be driven towards increasing comfort and avoiding hardships and working less. And that tends to lead to giving away things that protect our freedoms and our liberty and our capacity to take care of ourselves and manage new situations. And so the more we become dependent on it, I really do think that's problematic, especially if we're designed to work and be social and conquer and go out and explore this world, which I think, again, that flows out of a Christian worldview.
How about AI potentially taking away people's jobs as well? There's always that concern too.
I think that's somewhat inevitable, and there's a good part and a bad part of that, because there are certain jobs that are dangerous and humans get hurt, and so if we can have AIs do that, but just becomes a lot easier. Or you know, if your screwdriver breaks, you may be sad, but you go to the store and buy a new screwdriver. If you break an arm and you can't work, that's a bigger deal. So there are aspects of what an AI can do that will help humanity. Again, we have to be careful that we don't kind of have that Wall-E type approach where we want the AI to do everything so that we can just sit back, play our games, watch TV, and enjoy sodas on the couch. That's not healthy for us.
So how do we ensure the goal of keeping AI's impact on society very beneficial?
I think it's incredibly important that as we're developing the technology, we also need to be equally serious about thinking about the ethical, theological, and philosophical ramifications. And I know there are people who've thought about that, and there are people involved in that conversation, but we seem to be kind of driven by what can we do at this point. And I just want to make sure that we're very intentional about making sure we're thinking about, is this a good idea? Do we really want to do this? What does it say about our place? And might we be doing something that ultimately is detrimental to humanity in the way we're developing AI? I think if we can do that, we can use the power that AI will bring by avoiding the consequences that would come by using it improperly.
Dr. Jeff Zwerig, Senior Research Scholar with Reasons to Believe, thanks for joining me today from Los Angeles.
Enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.